Hello, my name is Lisa Ross, though you may know me better as Paper Daisy Creations, and I am the knitting pattern designer for the Socks of Green Gables collection. This is the Kindred Spirits sock, and I am going to show you how to create these little birds right here, as they're called, little birds, or also known as 1-2 left cross cables and 1-2 right cross cables. And when worked in subsequent rows by staggering it, you get this really fabulous textured pattern that can really liven up your socks. It's a fun texture to use with a lightly variegated or low contrast speckled yarn. So I have my sock and I am past the heel. Right now I am knitting these on 9-inch circular needles, which is my preferred method for knitting a leg of a sock. You can use, of course, 2 circulars or 2 long circulars. You can use magic loop. You can use double pointed needles, whatever works for you. If you are using a 9-inch circular, I recommend putting stitch markers to indicate the instep and the back of the leg. Or if you're on the foot, the instep and the sole. All right, so the next, I'm actually beginning with row 1 of the patterning, and this is the size medium sock. So keep in mind that for your size, you might be working the stitches a little bit differently, working a different number before or after. So I'm going to start by knitting 3, and now I am up to the slipped stitches. Now for all of the slip stitches in this sock, you're going to be holding the yarn toward the wrong side of the sock when slipping those stitches. So I just keep holding that yarn in back, and purlwise, I stick the right needle in and slip 1, 2. Now when I'm knitting this next stitch, I don't want to pull the yarn too tightly. I don't want to try to like squeeze it behind these stitches. I want to leave a nice even length across there. So what I'm going to do is I sort of tug these stitches over just a little bit, and then I knit the next stitch. And that way that, that strand of yarn lies neatly right across the back of the sock. So I knit 10, and I'm ready to slip those stitches again. So I always like to double check and make sure that my pattern stitches are lining up. So the 2 stitches that I'm slipping should be worked directly above these stitches that are from a few rows back. So I'm going to do that. I slip 1, 2, and make sure this yarn is going to lie nice and evenly across the back. I'm knitting 10. Keep in mind your patterning might be a little bit different depending on what sock you are working. And now I am ready to slip the final stitches. So I slip 1, 2, keep that yarn stranded along the back, and I knit to the end of my instep. All right. I'm going to go ahead and work across the back of the leg, which is worked just in stockinette. I will knit these quickly and be back for the next round of patterning. Okay, so I'm back to the instep once again, or the front of the leg in this case, but it is continuing the instep pattern, and I'm going to work the next round just the same as I worked the previous one. So when I come to these 2 stitches that I'm about to slip, I want to just double check and make sure that my strand of yarn is behind those 2 stitches. And that just keeps me on track to make sure that I'm slipping the correct stitches and that everything is lined up and as it should be. So this round works up very quickly and gives me a chance to double check and be sure that I have lined up my textured stitches. There are those 2, the yarn's behind them. I slip those Again, I'm not pulling the yarn super tight when picking up after these slipped stitches. You want to leave it not slack, but just loosely across the back. So I have one more to knit here, and now here are the 2 slipped stitches. And I can check a few rows down to make sure that it lines up with the previous little birds down below. I am purling each end of the back of the leg and knitting across the back. So I will line that up and be back to show you the rest of the step. All right, now we are ready to begin round 3 of the patterning, and this is the fun one. This is the one that uses the left and right crosses. Now, I am not a fan of cabling without a cable needle. I always keep my cable needle handy. Whenever I'm working cables, I like to use it, unless I'm doing simple left and right twists. But I have to say that this is one exception. So I'm going to show you how to work these stitches without a cable needle, and it's really not hard. The chance of dropping your stitch is fairly minimal, and you are able to work it much quicker because you don't have to mess with that drafted cable needle. And I don't know about you, but looking for the cable needle when I need it tends to take up a lot of time. Even if I just used it on the previous round. Okay, so I am knitting the first stitch of my round. Now yours again might involve knitting more or fewer stitches. And now I can see that my 2 slipped stitches, I have 2 knit stitches, and then these are the 2 slipped stitches. Now what I'm going to do is take the first 2 stitches here that had been knit, and I'm going to slip them purlwise onto the right hand needle. Now, this is the first of my slipped stitches. And what I'm going to do is take it off of this needle, but I'm going to kind of stretch it out a little as I do that. So I take it off that needle and just drop it. Now that was worked on a different round than these stitches because it has been slipped for the past 2 rounds. So that is just going to hang out and look exactly like that and make it easy for me to pick back up in just a minute. Whereas the stitches that were worked in the same round might get stretched out or, might fall out of the stitch where they're supposed to be. So next I'm going to slip those 2 stitches back onto the left needle, and I want to scoop this stitch back up. Now I'm going to do it with the right needle. You could do it with the left needle. I just want to pick it right back up and put it on the needle. So it's stretched out across those 2. And now I can knit it. I knit those 3, and I've just worked my 1, 2 right cross. 1 stitch crossed over these other 2 stitches. Okay, the next stitch is even easier to work. This was my other slip stitch, and I'm going to be working the left cross. So I'm going to stretch it out a little as I pull it off that needle and just let it hang out there. I knit the next 2 stitches, and now I need that stitch back. So I'm going to use the left needle here. You could also use the right to scoop it up. And now I just knit it off of the needle. And that is a 1, 2 left cross, 1 stitch stretched across the other 2 stitches, and that is worked without a cable needle. So I'm going to show you that one more time, knitting 6 stitches, and getting back to the next spot where I'm going to be working my cable. All right, so again, I'm going to take these stitches, these first 2 stitches, slip them onto the right needle. I stretch out that third stitch as I pull it off. Put these 2 stitches back on the left needle, and I scoop up the stitch that I need. And that stretches it across there. That's going to be the next stitch that I knit. 1, and then my 2 that were left on. All right, next I'm going to do my 2-1 left cross. That was my 2-1 right cross, where 1 crosses to the right across the 2. This one, I just stretch it out and drop it off the needles. You can see these 2 strands where it had been slipped. It's just going to hang out there. I knit 2, scoop it back onto the left needle, and knit it. And that has completed my 1-2 left cross. I am going to show you now how to do this with a cable needle, just in case you're struggling, because if those stitches pop out, it can be a pain to get them fixed, and you might find that it is easier to use the cable needle. So I'm going to show you how to cable those stitches for the final repeat of this patterning. Now, one nice way of making sure you're on the right track is that the 6-stitch patterning stays in line. So right where those little birds went before on the previous repeat, they line up and those 6 stitches stay in between the next set of 6 stitches. Okay, so using a cable needle, I need to slip 2 stitches, always purlwise, onto the cable needle, and I hold it to the back. This is to make my 1-2 right cross. I knit 1, which was my slipped stitch, off of the left needle, and now I knit 2 off of the cable needle. That does the exact same thing, 1 stitch over 2 to the right. And finally, I'm going to do my 1-2 left cross. I slip 1 stitch onto the cable needle. This had been my slipped stitch, and now I'm going to knit 2 and knit 1 from the cable needle. So a little bit more effort. You do need to have that cable needle if you want to use it. And I have worked the exact same stitch pattern as early in the row where I did it without the cable needle. So again, this is for the Kindred Spirits socks, part of the Socks of Green Gables collection. You can find both the sock patterns, the individual sock patterns, and the collection on Ravelry and on paperdaisycreations.com. And I'm wishing you all happy knitting.